Okay, we're in the new shed. Bit of an explanation about what it is we are doing. Okie dokie, we are starting with pieces of material like that. Two different types of material, and we are stacking them up in alternating layers, or however I shall please, to make a block that looks like that. Weld a stick on the end of it, put it in the press, and we are going to forge it in some dies that are shaped like that to get this shape. Once we get that shape, obviously the bar is a lot smaller, so it reduces it down in every direction, ends up being a lot smaller, and you end up with this sort of effect in your bars. Then we flatten it from top to bottom, down this way and up this way, and we are getting crushed C's. Then we're going to stack those crushed C's up, because obviously as we squish a material down, that meat has got to go somewhere, so therefore it gets longer. And then we chop it into 4 sections, and I've drawn 5 here, but it doesn't matter. And we are getting crushed C's stacked on top of crushed C's. And it's the same over that side. Crushed C's stacked on top of crushed C's. And then we are going to turn the billet once it's forge welded together. So every time we do this, we're forge welding 1260 odd degrees Celsius. Then we are going to crush it in like this, and we get the pattern where the crushed C's are in line like that. And we're going to squish it in from the corners and turn it down so that it ends up being a square that way. And that makes the pattern look sort of something like that. But obviously it's going to have all the other C's inside. And then from there we get that pattern, and instead of stacking them on top of each other as they are, we stack them radially, like so. So that pattern, if we put a center line on it, radiates around like that. What that does then is that gives us that pattern. And then we draw that out into long pieces, and we forge weld those together through there, obviously. Draw it out, and we end up with that, and then we do repeating on itself, and we are now ending up with that corner, and we forge weld them together. I've actually gone and done that pattern. So I've done that 4-way there, and then I've reforged it to be a 3x2. So that pattern that I showed you the end of is actually that way around, and it is that pattern repeating. Rightio, from there we then have a billet. Apart from our billet is 3x2, so it's 6 individual squares like that, forge welded together, and we're going to chop it like that into 5 pieces. And then we're going to lay those pieces down, so they all individually lay down. It actually ends up going, if that's 1, and that's 2, and that's 3, and 4, 5, like that. When they lay down, that end will join with that end, and then that end will join with that end, and that end will join with that end, and that end will join with that end. So what we end up with is this pattern here, bada bing, bada boom, like that. And the grain is effectively, the picture on the end of it, or the pattern on the end of it, is effectively on the top and the bottom. And what we do is we layer a piece of mild steel on top and bottom, and we forge weld it together, and we can actually join those through there because we're compressing down from the top. Now I've cut these sufficiently thick enough through here that once I've squished this down and made the whole billet wider and longer, we have enough to make our knife. So what knife are we making? What the design is going to be? Luke came over, we hashed it out, we went through a bunch of different designs. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. So we started off with a pretty basic straight one, and he was originally wanting a feather Damascus, and we drew up a couple of different designs, and we modified the design to be what it was like, and we drew around a knife that he had that he wanted. And through conversations, he's decided that this time around, and looking at other knives, went to that one, and what he settled on is this one here. Oh, I can't zoom out enough. So that is generally what we are aiming for, something like that. And of course, it will have this mosaic pattern. So we've got a known width. We sort of know our thickness, and it'll be a hidden tang inside of there. And bada bing, bada boom. We'll see how we go. Righto, so time to do some forging.